It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980 on a Tuesday. That's not going to suck. We got a short one. We're off running, and we're done at 6:15 today. We got Hoya's Hoops tonight, so let's get going with today's top story, which is the Commanders are a hot job, and they are getting the interviews that everybody wants. And we'll take the vibe check on this starting pretty much now, 301-230-0980. We'll do calls for this first half hour. Then Lindsay Czarniak is going to join us at 4:30. But it is pretty impressive to see the list of names that the Commanders have submitted interviews for, some of whom they are already interviewing. Anthony Haney, a super producer, of course, at this fine radio program. They are interviewing Adam Peters, like today. Adam Peters, who last year told everyone, kind of buzz off, I'm done. And I do wonder, here's a wackadoodle. It's not a conspiracy theory. It's just like this is one way the puzzle pieces could fit together. The Commanders have currently retained Martin Mayhew, who worked with Adam Peters in San Francisco. He is currently their general manager. One of the thoughts, the predominant thought, by the way, of I would say the last couple of weeks when it came to Peters is he's not leaving San Francisco, is that he is just going to get elevated in San Francisco because they've already made John Lynch the president out there, and they could just move Peters up to GM or even a VP position. Well, what if they just kept Mayhew as GM? Peters really would run the show, so don't be like, Martin, They just kept Mayhew as GM, and they hired Peters as high up as team president, like president of football operations, and they let him kind of run the everything. I think that's an interesting possibility, and obviously Peters would decide. Do I think that ultimately would happen? Probably not, but I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility. Martin obviously has all the relationships with the scouts already, and just to be very clear, scouts staying in their positions is how this typically works for an NFL draft cycle. If they want to hire new scouts, they'll do that after the draft, but you're so far into the process already that you will take the reports and such from this group, and you will make your decisions there. And, of course, Peters, as someone with a scouting background, will do his own tape study, especially on the quarterbacks. And how you use the information your scouts give you is more important than the scouts themselves. Sure, there are scouts that are special just like any other job, but really it's how you decipher the information, how you create your board, how that matches with what your coach wants to do. And I think what makes Peters so intriguing is philosophically he has worked with Kyle Shanahan, and whether it's Bobby Slowick, Ben Johnson. I mean, look, if Aaron Glenn, if you want to go defensive, Aaron Glenn or Raheem Morris, those guys also come from like that Shanahan tree. Glenn's a little more complicated, but like Aaron Glenn has been working day in, day out against Ben Johnson for the last couple of years in Detroit. The physical, run first, super detailed nature of offensive football that they have there is something that Glenn is certainly going to bring wherever he goes if he gets a head coaching job. So I'm pretty excited to see what happens. There are obviously other names as well. Ian Cunningham, Alec Hallaby, Cunningham from the Bears, although he was with the Ravens for a lot of years before that. Hallaby from the Eagles has a deep analytics background. And it also is worth pointing out that multiple of these guys could wind up getting hired. Mayhew could stay on, Hurney could stay on. In all likelihood, those guys are probably out. So if the GM job becomes vacant, like I think it probably will, they could hire Peters as the VP and Hallaby as the GM. And then you get someone with a scouting background and someone with an analytics background. Catherine Raish has not emerged as a name yet, but like she's another one that has like an interesting background that will get looks this cycle that when paired with someone else could be a really great fit. And again, there's kind of at least two positions that they're going to be filling with some of these top people potentially, a la what the Wizards did, by the way. I know this off to a pretty uninspiring start because they intentionally are bad this year. But when we all had our eyes on like what will they do at GM, they hired Michael Winger and then hired Will Dawkins. They hired two. And I think that's what's going to happen potentially with the Commanders, and they could even get two off of this list, depending on what the other options are for these people and how they would decipher the roles. That said, I don't want to say get your hopes up too high on that in terms of two top names, a Hallaby and a Peters, for instance, because those guys are going to have options. I don't think Hallaby is going to leave the Eagles to become the number 2 here, even if it's assistant GM to GM, because he can probably be the GM and be the number 1 guy somewhere else. And that obviously is a big deal for him and for anybody, both in terms of prestige, but also in terms of money. So let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Again, Lindsay Czarniak will join us coming up at the bottom of the hour. Right now, let's hit the phones, though. 301-230-0980. That's the Ace Law listener line. If you're in a wreck, Ace Law helps you get a check. Call 8888 Ace Law. Let's go to Paul. Paul, thanks for calling. You're on the Hoffman Show.
All right. Good afternoon. I'm really feeling this process right here. I've been waiting for this for a while right now, man. And the climate check is that I think that when it's all said and done, man, I think we're gonna get the GM that we look for. The coach, that's still up in the air right there. I really don't know which way they're gonna go, but I think it's gonna probably wind up being a D coordinator, and we're just gonna have to wind up, finding somebody on the OC to get us going, man. But other than that, man, I'm just glad we're in this position right now, man. Have a great day, man.
All right, thanks, Paul. I am too, and I had this conversation with a player on, God, that was only yesterday. Oh, dude, Anthony, Monday was yesterday?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
What? Okay. Wow. I had 17 days yesterday. We had the locker clean out. We had the Harris press conference, the podcast, we had the show. I think I went home after all that.
Yeah, Monday was a jam.
I watched a national championship game.
Mm-hmm.
A lot. Anyway, the point is, yesterday, 48 days ago, I had a conversation with a player, and we were just kind of chit-chatting, catching up on the season, and he was talking about how hard it was, and I was like, look, I'm not telling you it's harder for us than it is for you, but, like, when people think that we want y'all to be bad because we like controversy or thrive on negativity, they could not be more wrong. It sucks talking about bad football. It doesn't matter. It feels empty. Nobody's happy. It's a bad ecosystem filled with bad vibes and bad substance. When a team is good, it's incredible. And I was talking to Fortier about this too. And he was laughing because he's like, you want to know what my first job was here? I wrote about the Washington Nationals for the Post, and they won a World Series. And that was really good for traffic. Lots of people were clicking on Sam's work in 2019 as he was writing about the Nationals' run to a championship. And certainly we saw the most listeners we've had this year is at the beginning of the season when the optimism was at the highest and the vibes were the best. And then you have people that kind of check in when things are good. Like, of course, there's diehards, and people listening right now are mostly diehards, and that's fine. But also probably some people that are more casual that are like, okay, the train wreck's over. Let me check back in and see what's next, because you feed off that optimism. And then when it gets negative, like, you just check out. It's like, I'll come back if it's good, but like I'm not gonna invest emotional energy if I got a family and kids and my own work. Like, I got enough stuff that's required in life that can be stressful for me to add football. Football's supposed to bring joy. And so the better it is, for lack of a better way to put it. But I was having that conversation with the player, and I echo that here. Like, I am excited that this place is going to be, and this team, the conversation around it is going to have a healthy injection of optimism in it for good reason. Not Ashburn syndrome. Not a bunch of people being like, this guy's great when he's mediocre. Or us, and I'll say us, right? I'm not going to pretend like I sit above this. Us putting a lot of stock into something that was a long shot. Like, I don't think that we collectively, and I'll speak for myself, I don't know that I did a good enough job, despite my own personal optimism for Sam Howell, for instance, to be objective about how tough it was going to be for him and the kind of odds he would have been overcoming. It was something I definitely brought up on occasion, but I didn't want to just sound like I was being a Debbie Downer the whole time. So you just kind of talk about the parts that are going well. And that's a good lesson for me as I continue to do this over the course of my hopefully very long career yapping into microphones of like realism sometimes isn't very fun, but it's important so you don't look like a boob later. And so, yeah, to echo Paul's sentiment on the phones, the vibe is good right now. The vibe is excellent because all you can do is go out and talk to and hopefully ultimately hire someone who is universally revered as one of the best candidates on the market. And those are the only kind of people that the Commanders are interviewing right now, starting today at Josh Harris's ridiculously nice house in Miami. When we get back, more of your phone calls at 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and always live on the free Odyssey app. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Anthony, the subtle sing-along that you're doing right now, kind of a fun bit.
I mean, James Brown, he's gonna get me up every time,
Of course.
every time, and
Get up. Get
it
on
also
up.
just it captures how I'm feeling as well. I feel good.
I gotta say, what's the vibe check over there? I felt almost bad yesterday. Like, look, that's some days the days as a producer on a show, right?
Yeah.
Some days Anthony gets a lot of mic and camera time. Other days he floats in the background and makes sure that the boat doesn't sink.
Yeah.
Yesterday was a boat don't sink day. But you know, you got thoughts, you got feelings, apparently good ones.
Mhm.
What's the vibe check over there before we get back to the calls? Again, the phone number, as if you need it, 301-230-0980.
I mean, I just feel as though, Josh Harris, the way he went about handling, the Ron Rivera, being dismissed, I guess. And then what he did, following, I just think everything he did was like super calculated. And usually, like, our franchise deals with leaks, and the facts we didn't see Bob Myers, like his hiring came out of left field, and even some of the names. I feel like he wanted everybody, he wanted to put everybody on notice and inform them like we're going after these high, profile guys, and I just think it was like very calculated the way he went about it, and the
Totally.
fact that Adam Peters actually went to high school with Bob Myers. Yeah,
Crazy.
I think that's even more, telling. And it sort of, gives us a one-up over some of the other people that he turned down. So I think right now, from like a strategic standpoint, Josh Harris is killing it.
Yeah, I mean, a couple things. One, I think Adam Peters is so intriguing to me on so many levels.
Mhm.
And by the way, people from Detroit also intriguing to me on this level. Like, you have a once proud franchise. The 49ers are actually a better comparison than the Lions, because the Lions have been sad for basically ever. Like, the Commanders have, I can't believe I'm about to say this, but the Commanders have only been sad for 30 years, right? Like, legitimately only, quote unquote, sad for 30 years. But they were one of the best teams in pro football from the time of basically their founding. They hit a pretty bad lull in the middle of their franchise history because they were racist and they were the last team to integrate. And then it was like, oh, well, if we cut our talent pool dramatically back by not letting any black players play for the team, we're probably not going to be as good. And then eventually the U.S. government stepped in and fixed that. And all of a sudden they were back on track. And then they are good throughout the 70s, the 80s, into the early 90s. And then sadness, right? That is a not terribly dissimilar track from the San Francisco 49ers, who under Bill Walsh, obviously, with Joe Montana and then Steve Young and Jerry Rice and everybody that was there, were really, really good. And they were excellent, even during stretches of the 90s, early 2000s, like the Jeff Garcia TO teams. But when Adam Peters got there post Jim Harbaugh, that was not a great spot. And, I saw, I know Mitch Tischler was on, our buddy. It was great to see Mitch yesterday out at the park. But Mitch was on with JP earlier today over on The Fan, and he talked about Harbaugh, and he said, hard no, that dude is chaos, and we've just been through too much chaos. And I was like, you want to know what? That's a great point. I actually agree with that, and that is a good enough point to change how I feel about Jim Harbaugh here. Someone should hire him. Carolina, for instance, would be a very smart place to hire him because he could, either David Tepper would pay him a lot of money and fire him in 2 years because they're sick of each other, or he would actually let Harbaugh work and he would totally change the nonsense that has been happening in Carolina since Tepper took over. But either way, you need someone who understands how to turn a franchise around and create stability, which is what Ron's job was kind of supposed to be. And then Snyder, Ron didn't do a good job. And Ben Standig's piece today in The Athletic, I thought, was phenomenal in categorizing how Ron just kind of chased headlines and chased narrative as opposed to making good, solid, long-term thinking decisions. But the owner also created even more chaos instead of letting Ron actually try to quell it. So the pile of the pile of
he almost pooted on himself.
It just got bigger as it went, as opposed to Ron being able to shrink it. And again, Ron also didn't do a good job of shrinking it. In fact, I would say he added to the pile as often as he shoveled some of it off the top. Peters helped clean up that San Francisco organization. There was obviously some winning that happened there, but it was in not a very good place by the time Harbaugh left, and then Chip Kelly, and then they ultimately bring Kyle in and kind of that crew, and they're able to get it right. Detroit, same thing. They took a culture that was awful. Like, it is bad enough in the Lions organization that Barry Sanders walked away, Calvin Johnson walked away, Matt Stafford was like, get me out of here. But by sheer force of will with what Dan Campbell has done, and the front office folks there who are in lockstep with him, and I guess ownership getting on board to whatever level they've empowered those people, they have done a really phenomenal job of flipping it there. And I think people with that experience is a good choice here. And that's why I think Johnson is so intriguing to me. It is why Peters is intriguing to me. There's an element of Slowick that's intriguing, although Bobby was in San Francisco and then he was in Houston. So even though Houston, there is some of that, it was just 1 year. Like, I like the fact that Johnson is like sustained it over multiple years, even if it's just 2. But it feels less fluky. But I like, to me, that's one of the big appeals of a guy like Peters is San Francisco assistant GM, of course, is he understands not just what good organizations look like all the Baltimore people will, and they could certainly build it. But he understands what it's like to flip it and create it, as opposed to, I started working for Ozzie Newsome in 2013, and I've known a decade of success, but I wasn't there when it started in the way that, an Adam Peters was in San Francisco.
Nah, I mean, I agree, but also I think also with the candidates that Josh Harris is looking into, they're like super young. And remember, it was a time when the Bill Belichick deposit to DC was, sort of kind of not growing legs, but like there were just rumors out there and speculation. I just don't even like see it anymore, just because of the pool of guys that like he's looking at. They seem young, they seem, innovative and things of that nature. And I think he's ready to, let the past be, the past glory, and move into like a different realm of things. So.
I think that's something that's super important is like, can you hire someone that's going to be ahead and stay ahead of the curve?
Yep.
Because it's real easy to get caught behind in this league. And that's something that I'm trying to decipher right now with Mike Vrabel, because all of a sudden he is available. And I like Mike Vrabel a lot, and I'm pretty sure he's going to win a lot of football games wherever he goes. But is that truly the guy at the stage of organization that we are in here with number 2 overall pick, pretty blank slate, etc., that you want to bring in? I know Lynnell has really strong thoughts on that. So 5:30 today, we will talk with Lynnell about that, an Overreaction Tuesday. I'll even go ahead and tell you, Lynnell, I saw a tweet from Lynnell earlier that said Mike Vrabel should shoot up number 1 to the top of Josh Harris's list. Is that an overreaction? We will talk about that at 5:30 on Overreaction Tuesday here on the Hoffman Show. When we get back, joined by a very different but equally great voice, someone who is very entertaining, very thoughtful, and that is our old friend Lindsay Czarniak, of course, former NBC4, former ESPN, NFL on Fox sideline reporter. Lindsay joins us next on the Hoffman Show, Team 980, always live on the free Odyssey app and streaming live on YouTube.
California a
Did.
mess in downtown Nashville every day of the week and twice on Sunday. Not even.
We moved hotels the next night. I still am with for that. But yeah, we moved hotels the second night.
Wow.
It was fun. You say they rely on them. We went to brunch with my buddy the next day, who was a Nashville native and has lived in Nashville long enough that he remembers when it was more than just the middle of the world. And he's like, yeah, we're pretty much on the woo girl economy.
Yeah, that's precisely what's going on. The downtown businesses cater to that. If you try to get it shut down, you're probably the one getting thrown out. It is what it is right now. It's weird, but Nashville, baby. What are you gonna do?
Yeah. So I will add one more small part to this story, and this is the part, frankly, that I've been waiting to tell you all week as well. That was kind of part one. We got quality Yates reaction. Part two, as we leave the hotel the next morning to go to breakfast. Remember, the wall's very thin, so we think it's going. But as we walk down the hallway, my dear sweet wife just starts saying in a slightly elevated volume voice, It's been proven that the later groups stay out and make noise and all this stuff at their bachelorette weekend, the higher the divorce rate.
Oh God!
Also the better
trash,
chances.
Basically.
And also the better chances.
Wow. Okay. Okie dokie. So Rachel was pissed, basically.
I have a lot of tolerance for the woo girls. They say on the internet, like, free feel stuff, like your friends' photos, do whatever. But like, whatever you do for your own, don't read the comments. Bad idea. What do we do?
We read those comments, baby.
That is exactly what we do. That was a little bit better. I still feel like that one was a little muted. I think sometimes it feels like you build yourself up a little too much, and then sometimes you don't quite go for it.
Because I ain't want to go screaming all the way. The thing is, though, my mic is a little lower than yours, so maybe I could have actually, did what I really.
Mic also moves. You can go. Ooh. Did you know you could play tricks with a microphone?
I think I'll try that next time.
Okay. You want to give another shot?
Read those comments, baby.
There we go. All right. I feel ready now. They get real Icarus-y, to go back to your Greek mythology days. You remember the story of Icarus, Anthony?
Not quite, Frank.
What do they teach you at Georgetown Prep? Icarus, the guy who flies too close to the sun.
Nope.
What do they teach you at Georgetown. Anthony, I think you just put at Georgetown Prep.
Word.
There's no way that they did not teach you this Georgetown Prep.
We actually did a lot of Greek mythology, though. We didn't talk about Icarus flying too close.
You did. You don't remember it. I feel very confident. Who can we call
It's okay.
at Prep
I'm
to
gonna ask my
confirm
kids
this?
I mean, I will just do that right now, actually.
I would like you to ask someone of authority, do we teach about Icarus?
2 hours later.
Did we ever check in on that, Anthony?
Yeah, my classmates actually texted me and said, yeah, we've done it.
Okay. Yeah, we'll have to figure out where you were on that day of class at a later date.
You're right.
Sabalenka makes the U.S. Open final, the Belarusian player, and here's how it sounded on Belarusian television.
Арина Соболенко! Во-во-во-во-во-во! Что Арина не даст первой ракетки мира.
Yeah.
Получите!
Oh, yeah.
Rising up! Back on the street! Did my time, took my chances. When the distance, now I'm back on my feet. Just a man and his will to survive. So many times it happens to you. Change your passion. It's the eye of the tale of the night. Rising up to the challenge of her. And they lost no. Это я сдулся.
No notes. always live on the free Odyssey app, and we are streaming on YouTube at the Team 980 as well. And it's our pleasure to welcome back to the show, friend of the show. She's been, of course, NBC4 here in DC, Fox Sports on the sidelines for the NFL, formerly with ESPN. She's just Lindsay Czarniak, which is good enough for me. Lindsay, what's up? Thanks for coming back to the show.
That's maybe the coolest intro I've ever heard of myself. So thank you so much. No, it's always great to chat with you. Thank you. I mean, I was thinking about all you guys yesterday, just like, oh man, if there were one day I would love to be back just in the thick of it in DC, it would be that day. I cannot believe how much went down.
Yeah, it was so much. And we were just talking a few minutes ago about how, you know, we knew the Rivera news was coming, but then you have this other thing with Bob Myers and Rick Spielman. But let's start with Ron. Like, when you think back to the 4 years and everything that's gone on, Ron adjacent and things he had to deal with, like, how do you try to begin to summarize? Like, if you were doing the NBC4 Sportscast last night and you were given whatever number of short minutes you get in local TV sports, you had to try to, you know, deliver that 30, 45 minute long summarization of it. How would you go about it?
Oh, that just gave me chills. That's such a good question. I think I would take it back even further, and I would talk about being in the room with him with 4 people when I was interviewing him for a sideline game I was covering down in North Carolina with the Panthers. And this was before he was fired there, and then finding out he was fired there, and I had a game the following week covering the Panthers, and the players were just distraught. And they were so distraught because I swear it felt like they had never loved a coach so much. So I would start there, but I would talk about in DC, obviously, the goodwill that he has created and cultivated with the players that he coached, with the coaching staff that he has. But also I would make sure to include the part about what he said, his statement afterwards, talking about partially that he led with, I thought this was really interesting. He led with the fact that during these 4 years and all this stuff off the field, he actually mentioned, you know, I think in his quote when he said it, that, you know, the name change, the management change, all of it. Like, I think he, in a way, I was like, that was smart, because it seemed to me that he kind of specifically mentioned all the things off the field. And obviously he was disappointed. He mentioned, you know, the division, obviously the success that he had. But I was like, okay, it is the truth that there's never been so much change in this organization during anyone else's tenure. I think you could argue that, you know, and he's just such a good person and good guy. And of course the health stuff he went through too. So I just, you know, in a way, it's kind of like there's not a better type of person that you want this to happen to, because you know that he can withstand it, because he is such a sensible coach. He's such a smart person. He has been there before because he was a player, but he's just such a coach of men. Like I said initially when he was hired, I really felt like it was the best thing that could have happened to that team, because he was the closest thing that Snyder had had to Gibbs in a long time. And what I meant was not only a football brain and a really steady hand, but also someone that could stand up for the team to him, to Snyder a bit, you know, like to babysit in a way. So I don't know. That's probably what I would say. So yes, I was, you know, I was super sad. I knew it was going to happen just like everybody else. It's one of those that just sucks because you just really like the guy, but I've never been more excited to be a Washington fan, to be honest with you, because the what they're doing is like so shockingly different and so good on so many levels. I believe that I think that people should be really excited.
Yeah. So I think to be very clear, what I'm about to say / ask you is a yes and to what you just said, because I don't want to just come off like a lot of fans are going to hear that and they're going to be like, oh, Lindsay's a homer. She likes Ron.
Yes.
You know, he led his statement by saying like, this wasn't good enough. Like this is the right move for the organ. Like he had no qualms about being fired. He knows that you can't go 4-13 and you can't be way under 500 like he was here and all of that stuff. But on the day someone gets fired, you don't need to necessarily like we all know why. So I appreciate the perspective from someone who's dealt with him human to human over the time. But one thing about people that have had those conversations with him, and Logan talked about this on Take Command with me yesterday, because he did the coaches show with him for the Commanders stuff. You just talked about like how smart he was as a football person. If that's true, which I don't doubt that it is, why did it not work on the football side of it? Because he made decisions that were very bad football decisions with a lot of consistency, which is how you wind up with the record that he had here. That's not being mean. That's just being factual about, what it is with the results already having, been decided.
I agree. And the answer is, I don't know, right? It's like and that's the truth. And it's like you look at it and you look at moving parts in personnel, and I tend to think of things too, like it's a perfect storm, right? It takes a perfect storm to get to a championship level team. It takes a lot more than just the X's and O's on the field, but at the core of it, to your point, it's the X's and O's on the field. So I do not know. And maybe it is as simple as the fact that there is so much of those other things that were going on that it just became overwhelming, that it became too much to even deal with, so that when you're making those decisions on the field, I don't know. So I think that's a really valid question. I think that, last night we're talking about it at the dinner table. My son's obsessed with football. And so we're like, okay, well, he's like, well, what happens now with Rivera? I don't know. I'm curious about that. Where does he go? Does he go somewhere? How is he viewed, to your point, as a leader on the field? I don't know. It's a hard one to say, but that's why I think it's so important that who they go with is not only obviously sound football, but they've got to have all the pieces. I think the one thing that I'm really excited about, I have covered both Spielman and Myers, and I was with Spielman in Miami, right? My first job covering sports was the Miami Dolphins. I went there in 2001, and he was the vice president of player personnel. He and Myers are similarly revered as just good people, but really smart, right? And I know with Myers, Draymond Green, there's so many things that he has brought people through, and I think people leave feeling the same way about him. So I'm just, not to totally go off on a tangent, but I feel like the character development and also the piece of it that is the glue that keeps an organization together and headed in the right direction is pretty impressive in the way they're doing this. The other thing is, I did an interview with Chris Paul a couple months ago, and it was literally 2 hours after he found out he was traded. And that was totally happenstance, right? So that wasn't supposed to be the timing. But it makes me think about, okay, Myers, that was one of the last things that Myers did before he left, right? So the trade happy mentality of the NBA, the risk involved with doing certain things. I wonder if this could get really interesting, in different ways that people aren't thinking about now. And I don't know, there's a lot that goes into it that I'm thinking about, but I think that, it's been a long time since the Washington organization, I think, has had the same type of reputation as a player's place. Did Rivera do that and bring people together? Yes, but it's different when you've got the GM and different leadership on board and the owner. The owner, Harris, going out and doing this is so different from anything we've seen in recent history, right? Being I want help. I want these people that are smarter than me in this regard to come in here and work to figure out these pieces. They could go and mess it up, though. I mean, they could go and mess it up in the draft. They've got to take a quarterback. They've got to do it smart, right? There's so much that they have to do. I personally feel like Bieniemy is one of the guys that every single interview I've ever been in, where it's been a team that's been one of the interviews before a game where I'm doing sidelines, anyone that has had them on their staff in recent history has been he has got to get a shot as a head coach. So I think that's an interesting one. I don't know how you feel about that. Yeah. And now I'm going to shut up.
Lindsay Czarniak is with us. I think I'll respond to the Bieniemy thing in a second. I've been fairly clear that I think Eric should get a shot somewhere, and I don't think it should be here, and I can unpack that in a second.
Yep.
But to kind of combine everything you just said that I think is really interesting and to a point, going back to what I originally asked about Ron, I think he bit off more than he can chew. I don't think he knew at the time, how big the mouthful was, if you will. And and nobody knew quite how big it would be. He knew he bit off a lot, but you add in cancer, COVID, and hey, this Snyder guy's pretty bad, but all of a sudden it's investigations with Congress and stuff. And that's a totally different level. In January of 2020, none of us knew that was happening. So to what Josh is doing, the organizational structure and making sure that there's the right scaffolding around all of the pieces, that the GM can GM, that the coach can coach, that all those things, it seems like that is something that Bob Myers and Rick Spielman understand and are trying to bring, that Josh understands and wants to bring, all of that. And then I think in terms of Eric and kind of how he fits into that equation as well is I do think there's something about just like starting fresh and kind of this newness to it. And I know that Eric rubs some people the wrong way in the building, and that is something that he's encountered in different places. And with different scaffolding, they're able to massage through it and work through it. And here, that was not the case. And I just think that he's incredibly smart. The guys that know him really well, like even guys that don't really love him are like, he's the same guy every day. I know what to expect, and I respect that about him. And I think that can really work. I just don't know with the water that's already under the bridge here, if it's the right move to include him here in the list of candidates.
I think that's an extremely valid point. 100%. I mean, that makes a lot of sense. And I think that that's a real thing to think about. I love a coaching search so much, and I know it's like so weird and twisted because I remember the Jim Zorn days, and remember that situation. It was like this never-ending who's who of. I felt like we were playing Clue. It's like what's going to happen. I just think it's so interesting because right now the list is like really long. You know, if you look out there and you look at people, Raheem Morris is interesting to me. I don't know how I feel, and you didn't even ask me this question, so I'm just going into this.
No, go for it. I was gonna ask you who you like as someone who, by the way, has been in all these production meetings and talked to a lot of these guys as coordinators. I was gonna ask anyway, so go ahead.
I mean, Raheem Morris, I feel like I like the defensive-minded side. I like the fact that he is a player's coach. You hear the names Harbaugh, Belichick. I don't know. It makes me nervous.
I'm with you.
I'd love them to get Tomlin, but I don't think that's going to happen. I don't know. What do you think?
I don't think Pittsburgh fires coaches. I don't think Tomlin's unfortunately.
They do not. No, they don't. Like they would have to pry away.
Yeah.
But
I am definitely of the hire the offensive coach. That way, even if you have success, like if D'Amico Ryans has success in Houston and Bobby Slowick gets a job, now CJ Stroud's got a second offensive coordinator in 2 years, and that makes me nervous. Although CJ might be good enough that it might not matter. He might be one of those dudes. But unless you hit the quarterback like that, replacing the OC with frequency, I think makes me nervous. So the Ben Johnsons of the world, Frank Smith down in Miami, Slowick in Houston, who they've requested. I think all those guys are really interesting. But a guy like Raheem, I think is pretty fascinating because he has coached some offense. Like he sees the game globally and kind of has a perspective that I think is really valuable. And I'd be curious from your experience, like the head coaches that you've got the chance to talk to and cover that are successful, like is there a common thread amongst them? Vision, communication, leadership, whatever it is that you're like, oh yeah, all those guys have that thing.
I mean, I feel like, you know this because you're around it every day. Like it's the simplest thing, that it's the coachability across all things. And it's not just offense, defense, special teams. It's managing men. That's why this morning we were talking about it. I keep bringing my son up, but I was like, they had this graphic on Sports Center, and my son like came downstairs when he wasn't supposed to, and I was like, look at this. I was like, Pete Carroll is one of the guys that they're looking at who has had success coming college to NFL. But I was like, it's so rare because it's a different man that you're coaching. So I think it takes someone who's got. I always tend to go defensive if you're picking one, like which, and I don't know why, because that doesn't necessarily make sense. But I think you've got to have the offensive-minded expertise, because especially with where they are right now, and meaning Washington. But I think a common thread would be it's the coachability, and it's like the galvanizing. And I know that sounds cheesy because it's boring, but it's like really, I think that's the truth. I think it's like, you've got someone who realizes that they're not smart enough in an area and doesn't try to be. And so gets the help below where they need it, brings in the person that they need, gives up the power where they need it. Like Bill Belichick giving up power in New England, if that's what happens, fine. But with Pete Carroll, I think one of the issues that ended up happening with Heat and Russell was Pete's system is great. Pete has this really fun, maniacal way of getting to his players. Like he will do stuff to embarrass them in front of the group in a way that's fun and ends up being funny at the end of a meeting, where I think some players would be mortified and embarrassed but it works. So he does this stuff that's really wild and fun. But I think after a while, that kind of thing whereas it might really bring people together in a college atmosphere, sometimes, I don't know, I feel like Russell, I'm not trying to like make this off on a tangent even more, but Russell Wilson is sort of an enigma in a way, just because he's got his own thing going on. There's a lot of reasons that did not work, that it's not working out. But I think that, I don't even remember why I said that. But I just feel like
talking about the personalities of head coaches and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I just think, it's the ones that know what they don't know and get the people to help them fill in those gaps and really have a way to get to every single player. It's very similar to a quarterback. It's there's a likability factor and there's a care factor about the other people liking you. I was just listening to someone talking about Lamar Jackson with that and saying that he really went out of his way early on to get his teammates to like him. We hear that a lot about quarterbacks, Joe Burrow sitting with all the different guys at lunch, whatever it is. But I think it really matters. And especially when you're the head coach and you've got a million things going on, a million different personalities. I feel like that's the one piece, that a player feels like they can go to you. And if you aren't good enough and if you're not doing well enough, they're just going to shoot you straight, but do it in a way that you're not going to walk out crying. You're going to walk out and want to do better. I think that's kind of getting into the weeds of it. That's the thing.
Yeah, no, I think that's so true. And I think my favorite thing you said there that is so important for head coaches is like, do you know what you don't know? And do you provide, and like, it's really, because in order to even have that thought, you have to understand what's required in the first place. And like, we wind up talking about Kyle all the time because of his history here, because a lot of the people, including for me, Logan, the person that I talk football with the most, like played for Kyle for half of his career. And, Santana Moss, who's an analyst in town, like he played for Kyle.
Yes.
All these people that just played for Kyle or covered Kyle. But when Kyle got to San Francisco, he set it up so that he could be the offensive coordinator. Mike did the same thing in Miami. Kevin did the same thing in Minnesota. Like, yes. I think Gannon's done a decent job of this early on in Arizona. Is like, I know I got this job because I'm good at this thing. I also know that a head coach typically doesn't do that thing or historically hasn't. So I need to set up other people to do that thing so I can do my thing. And like, if Pete's done that in Seattle, and I think Bill has failed at that in New England, which is part of the reason that he's having to restructure or find another job at the age of 70, whatever he is now.
Okay, so this is interesting though. You just mentioned Kevin O'Connell. Mm-hmm. Think about Matt LaFleur, right? Like I'm thinking right now, I am visualizing these rooms that I've been in doing interviews, and because we've always made the connection sitting in there like, oh, hey, I used to be in DC. I remember you did it up. There's something there that's interesting that I didn't really think about until you said it. Like Sean McVay, Matt, Kevin, Kyle. They all have that same sort of mentality, right? Of that type of thing that you just mentioned. So what was it in Washington that gave them that? Because they were all there sort of overlapping at a certain time. Was it Mike Shanahan? I don't know. I'm just saying.
Yeah, I think Kyle's probably the biggest driver of it. And like Kevin gets it secondhand through Sean because they didn't cross here. Kevin actually replaced Sean, but like Kevin goes out to LA. And I remember talking to Kevin when he left here, like he was not exactly sad to, instead of getting to coach under Ron here, all due respect to Ron, to get to go work with Sean in LA. Like as someone who had future head coaching aspirations, I think he knew that was the time when if you had lunch with Sean McVay once, you were a head coach at some point, which I was very sad because I'm still waiting on my call. Anyway, the point is, like all those guys kind of learned an attention to detail, a level of organization. And I think the thing, Jordan Rodrigue, who I'm sure you know, the Athletics Rams writer, did this phenomenal series in the offseason called The Play Callers, where she really detailed how Kyle specifically would just tear apart plays. And it's like, if you came to Kyle with an idea, it better work against every front, every coverage. You better have answers. And if it didn't, it wasn't going to make the playbook. And so if you come up like having to think like that, that's going to carry over for the rest of your career. And I think that's why that tree has been so successful. It's not that it's schematically superior necessarily to other stuff. It's that it's thought through with a level of detail and set up in a way organizationally that it makes it more foolproof than other, or more fail-proof than other places that aren't quite as detailed.
Yeah, because part of what you learned through was a fear of failing and not doing it the right way because of how tough those bosses are, like Kyle. Yeah. Like I love that. I think that's a really great point. That's how I felt working with George Michael sometimes.
Sure.
And I'm serious, but
Yeah.
I've said this before. It's like that was a boot camp that will, no matter what, always be the best experience of my career, hands down, because I learned more there than I would have ever learned anywhere else. And I've loved my other jobs too. I've learned different things in all of them, but that one was like, okay, anyway.
No, I think that's a great story and a cool place to end it. Anytime we can end on a George Michael story, is, I think a good place to end an interview on DC Sports.
God,
Radio.
what would he say now? He would be like, "What in the hell?" Who would he want? Who would he want?
I think we'd all love to know. That do you have any guesses? Who would be his number one guy?
That's so
I can't believe I just put that on you. That's so cool.
It would be someone who George would know what Myers, he would know because he would talk to them, and he would know what Myers and Spielman were thinking. He would be on the phone with Spielman first, and then he would talk to Myers, and he would know exactly what they were thinking and why the decision needed to be probably exactly what they're circling around. I believe that, but I don't believe it would be someone who is a seasoned head coach in the NFL right now.
Interesting.
But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong.
We'll see.
I know.
Hopefully sooner rather than later.
I know. Well, what is the latest time frame that you're hearing on when they're going to make a decision?
I would imagine. Well, they can't really interview anyone in person until like January 22nd. So
yeah.
I would imagine that championship week or Super Bowl week, depending on who they're hiring, that they get their guy, and hopefully the GM thing is done sooner than that. But that's the next month of shows, Lindsay. We're just trying to get through today.
I love it. So much to talk about. So many pieces to peel back in that onion.
For sure. Lindsay Czarniak, Fox Sports, of course, NBC4, ESPN. You've seen her everywhere. A great journalist here in D.C. Always a pleasure to have you on the show, and hopefully we'll have you back soon.
Yes.
There's so much to talk about.
You're the best. Always great to talk with you. Have a great time. Enjoy it out there. And yes, hope to see you soon.
I'm not really sure what I was going to say, but that's all right. YouTube audience, by the way, back with us now. Thanks for everyone who stuck through. A little bit of a snafu on that side of it, but we are rolling on YouTube, on the Odyssey app, live on your radio. And it's time, Anthony, to go around the NFL. And so multi-purpose segment here. One, we are going to we'll take a look back at the games, but considering it's already Tuesday, so much is already happening. We're not going to go too far into the games themselves, a couple of key points here and there, but mostly an opportunity to kind of put a bow on every team's season as we go through, and of course to do the all-important compiling, Anthony, of our final records of the regular season, though we are going to go through the Super Bowl.
I think I had a good week.
That's good for you. I don't know that I believe you. At least I know you didn't have a good Saturday.
Hey, look, I know. All right.
I didn't mean that even as a personal shot. I just know the game that we picked opposite on Saturday. But
it hit here.
Maybe you came back. All right, Steelers Ravens. We got that one right.
Yep.
This was ugly in every possible way. And the Steelers won, but they lost T.J. Watt in this game. By the way, Mike Tomlin today already ruled Watt out for the Steelers playoff game this weekend, which prompted a very funny tweet from J.J. Watt going, "You think they'd notice?"
That is hilarious.
I'm sure if I'm Mike Tomlin, I'd call JJ and be like, "Hey, man,
do you really want to play?
Do you want to? We got a roster spot. We got a jersey. As long as you TJ wear the same size." But anyway, Steelers get the playoff spot. Unbelievable that's a 10-win football team. They don't even have a quarterback. Like, they're just bouncing between Mason Rudolph and Kenny Pickett and Mitch Trubisky and whoever else played for them this year. Najee Harris, bona fide stud, 26 carries, 112, and a touchdown. Ravens sat everybody. It was a miserable weather day, and that's kind of that. Texans and Colts, brutal way for the Colts season to end, as Anthony was there to see in person. Jonathan Taylor, 30 for 188, but couldn't contain C.J. Stroud. Nico Collins, 9 catches, 195, and a touchdown. Texans make the playoffs, and ultimately with the Jacksonville loss, win the AFC South.
Yeah, definitely a heartbreak in Indy last weekend. They'll be back. That is all I'll say. I think.
I mean, could you imagine if this game was Anthony Richardson versus C.J. Stroud? And hopefully that's a matchup we get to see for years to come.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Crazy.
All right. So you got that. And then we get, so that's 2-0 for me, 1-1 for you. Browns and Bengals, not much to talk about here. Bengals, congrats to them on finishing over 500. The Browns sat everybody. Driscoll threw for 2 touchdowns. Bengals they had a party. That's what we both picked?
You chose the Browns.
Why?
I'm joking.
No. Okay, thank God.
You are perfect on the week so far, Craig.
All right, excellent. Love that. Lions and Vikings. Nick Mullins was super Nick Mullinsy. 396. That's twice this year he's been over 390. Unfortunately, they've lost both of those games. 2 touchdowns, 2 picks. JJ had 12 for 192 to close out the year. But really the big story of this one moving forward, Ant, is the Lions, who are headed to the playoffs with a 12-5 record, the number 3 seed in a home playoff game, lose their stud young tight end, Sam Laporta. His foot just kind of slipped on him. His knee got caught in a weird way. And Laporta is going to be out for the foreseeable future here. That is such a big blow to that offense. And ironically, the guy that they used to have there as their stud tight end, TJ Hawkinson, was on the other sideline for Minnesota. But Laporta sets the rookie franchise, or sorry, not the rookie franchise record, the rookie record period for catches by a tight end. And a couple of plays later, really, he limps off the field with a knee injury.
Yeah, super unfortunate. What is your your theory on resting guys at this juncture in the season? Like, you already got division locked up. I don't necessarily think you rest him though, because he's a rookie kind of thing.
I mean, I think and by the way, Laporta technically listed as questionable, so I guess maybe he could play this weekend. It wound up being a hyperextended knee. So that would be pretty sick if he could play this weekend.
Yeah.
Because he's a huge part of what they do, run game and especially in the pass game. I tend to side on I would almost treat it like a preseason game kind of thing, where I play my guys a little bit to try to keep the rhythm.
Get them out of there.
But get them out of there because, there's no real upside and there's massive potential downside. So risk management, I was kind of surprised that these guys were in there.
Yeah, they were in there.
I mean, I think you look
time.
at, I would pull guys way more than NFL coaches do. Like, 2 weeks ago when Mike McDaniel left Bradley Chubb and them in there late when they're getting blown out.
Yeah,
that couldn't be me. And and by the way, I don't think it will ever be Mike McDaniel again. I think he was like, that was dumb. And it wasn't dumb. It's unfortunate. It's unlucky.
Yeah.
But late in a close game, when you got bigger fish to fry, there's just no point. So I feel bad for the Lions in that. But they'll have to go forward without him or maybe with him, see if he can get back this weekend. Of course, also both their coordinators interviewing for jobs potentially over the next couple of weeks. So lots going on in Detroit. And if that wasn't enough in terms of the storylines, Matthew Stafford's coming back. How about that for a playoff matchup?
Man.
Stafford in Detroit against the Lions.
And then you got Goff going against his former team as well.
I mean, sure, but it's different when you got the guy who was there for 10 years and was the best quarterback in the history of the franchise coming back.
Got every record, yeah.
All due respect to Bobby Lane. Jaguars and Titans turned out be Mike Vrabel's last game. That is something we're going to talk about next, his candidacy for other head coaching jobs, including the one here in Washington. But Mike Vrabel goes out having just absolutely owned the Jags in their time together in the AFC South. Jags, they won. They were in. Trevor Lawrence stopped to the goal line, and they ultimately go from a team that had a path to the 1 seed for a long portion of the season to a team that doesn't even make the playoffs. Shows you how fractional the margins are. And, by the way, they let go of a bunch of their defensive coaches, which is the side of the ball that was better for them this year.
Yeah, I didn't quite understand. I didn't understand why they let go so many people on the defensive side of the ball, because guess what? They were opportunists. They came up, with big plays, big stops. Granted, against the Titans, it didn't necessarily work out that way, but for majority of the season, they definitely balled out. But yeah, going into week 13, they had a 98% chance to make the playoffs. And the fact they went out this bad,
brutal, man.
It's brutal.
There's
but
a couple of teams that just collapsed down the stretch.
Yeah.
Eagles,
Yep.
Jags, and what was the other one that I was thinking of? Dolphins have not been particularly great down the stretch.
And the Commanders too. We lost 8 straight.
That you gotta be up to collapse. It's
right.
like
we really went here. Like.
Humpty Dumpty had fallen off the wall. All that happened was some folks stepped on the eggshells. Jets and Patriots. 17-3 was the final in this one. You had the first, it's just an incredible end if this is the end for Belichick, although it sounds like they're trying to work some things out up there where Belichick could potentially give up personnel control and just be the coach and focus on that. And you look at what he did defensively this year, and he's clearly he can still coach on that side of the ball. But he's got to get a better offensive coach in there. And the one guy who's worked for him best over the years is Josh McDaniels. And there's rumors that already that McDaniels, who, by the way, I don't know who else would hire him, but that McDaniels could wind up going back to New England and help kind of reinflate that side of the ball for them. So all in all, a pretty embarrassing end against the team of the Jets, who Belichick just freaking owned over the years. Owned. And they're like, sucker. Breece Hall, 37 carries in the finale for 178 yards. What a miserable football game this was. That all of us were paying attention to because it had draft implications for the Commanders.
Yeah, and, ironically for us, it still ended up working out.
It sure did. In large part, thanks to the game we're going to talk about next. But it worked out in the end. Mm-hmm. That would be Falcons and Saints, which turned out to be the last game for Arthur Smith. Arthur Smith would be an interesting offensive coordinator for Bill Belichick. Not even kidding. Kind of a defense, run first kind of guy.
Yeah.
A little prickly, though.
Yeah.
Fit into the culture up there of coaches who are eccentric personalities.
Yeah, I just think he needs a quarterback, though, that he can, trust.
Yeah, well,
because they literally are a quarterback away.
They missed so badly on Ritter. I mean, it was funny because Ritter and Howell wound up getting compared because they're in the same draft and they kind of were named the starters. And the difference is Ritter was a third rounder. Ritter was designed to be the starter there. Howell was, I don't want to say an afterthought here, but it was that's going to be a backup who maybe if we get lucky turns into something, but he was a fifth rounder. Ritter, I would rather have Sam Howell, even with what I've seen in the last 6 weeks of Sam Howell. I'd rather have Sam Howell 7 days a week, and especially on Sundays, compared to Desmond Ritter. Ritter is just an inevitable bomb waiting to go off. And this game was tied 17-17 at halftime. And he comes out on was it literally the first play of the second half? Throws a terrible pick. Misses a bunch of other stuff. He throws for 291. He had a really good first half and really inflated that. In the second half, he was just awful. So despite Bijan going over 100 yards receiving, having another couple big carries, being just a stud, Drake London is really good. Kyle Pitts is criminally underused. They're so bad at quarterback. I would have probably seen if I could have continued with Arthur Smith, but I also just get the sense that there's he's a weird guy in terms of the friction he has with people. Obviously, he was ticked at the end of this one with what happened, and the Saints players, pretty stupid thing what they did there at the end, getting the touchdown out of victory. If you want to run a play, you run a play. But you can't go victory formation and then run a fake play when you're up 41-17. That's stupid. Yeah. And so ultimately 48-17 is the final score, and Arthur Smith got fired.
Yeah. Low character move by, Jameis and the Saints at the end. But Arthur Smith, yeah. It's time for him to go. But, yeah, Ritter, I think just going back to, his season as a whole. They had so many games. They had one, Craig. So many times he's in the red zone. He throws Benjamin St. Juste his first and only interception.
Yeah.
He fumbles out of bounds against the Bucs. They're just
it's the number
a
and
play
the timing.
away.
You're right.
Exactly.
You're right. Of those interceptions and those picks, those fumbles,
dude.
everything. It's brutal quarterback play. They should trade for Justin Fields if they can get him out of Chicago.
Oh.
That is the perfect fit. Now, ironically, the coach you'd want for that is Arthur Smith, but I'm sure there's plenty of other guys who would be very good. Like Slowick there, I think, would be fantastic, especially if they get a guy like Fields. All right, when we get back, we will go through the rest of the games, the rest of the storylines, including some division champions decided. That's next on the Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and always live on the free Odyssey app.
And they I told you how. No, that's the crap. I just told you how into it. No. It ain't about division. It ain't about division. It's about where they match it up. That's where we are.
It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. There's a video on the schedule page, Anthony.
Oh, that's what it was. I was like, do you not hear that?
No, I didn't because I left something on. It wasn't in queue, and then I see what happened there.
Yeah.
That was a wacky bit. Anyway,
I don't want you to get fined.
No one. Thank you. No one listening knows what the hell we're talking about, which is fine. Just know that Lynnell is coming in. Come in 10 minutes for Overreaction Tuesday. Right now, though, let's wrap up our look back at the NFL weekend. By the way, Anthony, how did we? Let's see. Browns, Bengals. I picked the Bengals.
Yep.
You also on the Bengals?
Yep.
Lions, Vikings.
Lions.
Titans, Jags.
Jags.
So that's one loss. Jets, Patriots.
We both chose the Patriots.
Idiots. That's 2 losses. Saints, Falcons.
We
Saints.
both chose the Saints.
All right, so we're doing pretty well. Bucks and Panthers. Ultimately, the really only thing to talk about from this game is that the Buccaneers won, and they won the NFC South, which means they get to host the Eagles in a playoff game. Yeah. Anything else you'd like to add?
Nope.
Okay. Bears and Packers. Jordan Love finishes off a tremendous regular season. 33 touchdowns, I think, wound up being the number, and just 11 interceptions. Another 300-yard day. Aaron Jones over 100 as well. Justin Fields, super interesting after this game. Talked about how, hey, if this is it in Chicago, like, I appreciate everyone. He knows he hasn't done enough to solidify his spot, but certainly a young player that grew. I'm very interested to see what they do. Eberflus is up for review. I think they should keep him. I would probably trade Fields and use the number 1 pick on Williams, but that's just me, Anthony.
It is interesting to say the least, man. Yeah, I think I'm with you, Craig. I think I trade Fields, but if I keep Flus, I think I reconsider keeping Fields.
It's 55-45 for me.
Yeah.
Like, I can make a real argument for strengthening the everything around Justin Fields. And especially, I think, if you keep Flus, right?
Yeah.
Because then you give it one more shot.
Yep.
And you say, hey, if Fields isn't the guy, we're going to know. We're going to move on from Flus, unless the defense is top 5 again and it's just clear Fields is the problem. Then you could do something else. But then you like really start over next year. You probably get a new offensive coordinator. But I think Getsy, the OC there, did a pretty solid job of finding ways to have success this year. Obviously, they only finished with 9 points, but like, they scored 30 a bunch this year.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously as the season went, they got really good defensively. So I think there is a case to be made for them, especially like, look, if New England or one of these other teams wants to trade up to 1, and Washington, and they're willing to give you a lot. I don't think Washington should, by the way. From New England, maybe it's a different story. Then you can trade down to like 3 and get a stud tackle and or a stud receiver. Like, I think that's a good way to go. Broncos finish out under 500 against the Raiders, who also finish 8-9. Nice little finish to the year for the Raiders. Antonio Pierce get that job?
I think he's deserving of it, to be honest.
I do too.
The way the team responded to him, the fact that, he's without Josh Jacobs, they have, a couple of more question marks. I think he's the guy for the job out there in Vegas.
I do too. I think it's going to be interesting because their defensive coordinator, who obviously helped AP with that defense a lot, made it as good as it was towards the end of the year. He's getting interviews for head coaching jobs, at least 1 or 2 places that I've seen pop up. So that's going to be very interesting. I think their interim GM is very highly thought of. He'll probably wind up getting the job. AP probably winds up getting the job. And then it's on them to find an OC and a quarterback. And then you're kind of in that conundrum of like, okay, we got to find someone who is hopefully going to be here a while, but is probably going to get hired if he's really good. But I just think, especially after they did it to Bisaccia a couple years ago, when the vibe is good, the energy is good, all the players are behind it, I think you have to make that move for Antonio Pierce. Eagles and Giants, upset of the day. I mean, the Eagles are just broken right now, especially defensively. And offensively, they're banged up now. What a disaster for them down the stretch. They go like 500 down the stretch, and they have the number 1 seed. Instead, it's this.
Yeah, I can't even put into words what the Eagles have done the last 6 weeks. Like, it's that bad. Like, how do you go from putting up these numbers looking this good to hitting rock bottom almost? Like, they're bad, man. To get destroyed by the Giants like that, they were getting skunked, Craig.
Yeah, they made it respectable-ish, 27-10 by the end, by scoring 10 in the second half. But they gave up 21 second-quarter points. Just a really, really bad stretch.
Do you think they've gone away from sort of kind of their identity, running the ball? I think they've just putting the ball in Jalen Hurts' hands too many times. I think not enough creativity with the run game. Like, I don't know. I don't know what they've done with their offense as of late.
Yeah, I mean, they rushed it, 24 times in total. But Gainwell was only 7 carries. I mean, they were rolling at the beginning of the year because DeAndre Swift was one of their best players.
Yep.
And that's changed dramatically.
Mm-hmm.
So I definitely think you're onto something there. I mean, they averaged 5.5 a carry. Kenneth Gainwell averaged 8.9 a carry. Probably should have given him the ball a little bit more. Alas. By the way, of course, on the Giants side, you have Wink Martindale resigning, so one of the best defensive coordinators out there. Curious to see where he winds up. You want a little revenge on the Giants, and you want to move to an area you're somewhat familiar with, a former Ravens coordinator. Hey, Wink, come on to D.C. That'd be fun to cover. Seahawks, 21. Cardinals, 20. Cardinals coming back, driving at the end, ultimately fall short. Nice finish to the year for Michael Wilson, their rookie receiver. He's a fun guy to watch as part of their build moving forward. Of course, the big question for them this offseason, what do they do with Kyler Murray? Chiefs and Chargers. The Chiefs won in a game that meant nothing. Cool. Rams, Carson Wentz had a nice little day, I guess. Sam Darnold had a very mediocre day throwing to, I guess, Ayuk played and Debo played. But Wentz rushed for 56 yards. I think that's the story of this game. Carson Wentz apparently can run.
And he had a tug.
Yeah, he ran it 17 times.
They ran a design QB draw.
It's crazy. This is not 2018. What are we doing?
I think it's also a good sign of, Carson going out there and showing he still got it, though.
I don't care.
Or maybe a Sean McVay.
No, he doesn't. He does not. He definitively does not still got it. The only thing that mattered in this game, big picture, Puka Nacua gets the rookie receiving record. Good for him. Heck of a draft pick by the Rams. Cowboys 38, Commanders 10. Obviously, we know what happened there. And then in the final game of the night, Bills 21, Dolphins 14. Fourth quarter collapse kind of by the Dolphins, but really just the Bills stopped getting unlucky / shooting themselves in the foot. They were the better team all game long pretty much. And Josh Allen turned the ball over in the red zone, had the silly decision at the end of the half, which I don't want to say it's indefensible. He had his guy running towards the end zone and thought he was going to get in, but you really got to put that ball in the end zone or else. So bad decision for sure. And eventually, he just finished some drives. And really, it's the Miami offense that you're worried about. But also defensively, the injuries have stacked up. And I just, unfortunately, because I really like that Miami team, I just don't think, it's not that they're not built for the playoffs. People are going to do the Miami cold weather, are you built for December bit? It's not really that. They're not the same team because they don't have the same dudes. And that matters. Talent matters in this league.
Yeah, I love to see what the Bills have done. I thought Stephon Diggs was going to finally get 100 yards. He started off the game really strong, but
yeah, he mattered in the game though.
Yeah, he definitely has some big catches. But still, I just want to see a little bit more. Josh Allen though, he's looking the part again.
He's going to finish near the top of some MVP ballots. I saw Orlovsky put him second. I'm trying to remember who he had first. I think Lamar.
Yeah.
I think Lamar, which tracks. All right, when we get back here on the Hoffman Show, Mike Vrabel fired in Tennessee. Should he be the top candidate for Josh Harris for the Commanders? Lynnell and I will discuss. It's an Overreaction Tuesday next on the Team 980. Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Lynnell Willingham joining us in studio for an Overreaction Tuesday. What's up?
How are you, my man?
I'm
Happy New Year. I know. It's a bit I have going on where for the first month of the new year, I will be saying Happy New Year.
Oh, there's like a whole Larry David, Curb Your Enthusiasm thing about how after January 3rd, you shouldn't be saying Happy New Year anymore.
Wow. Sorry, Larry
So
David.
I just feel like we need to hit that bum, 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 da-dun, da-dun, da-dun.
Yeah.
Anyway, so you shockingly, sir, have a take.
Yeah, I do.
As Mike Vrabel got fired by the Titans today, you said
he should automatically catapult to the top of Washington's coaching search list. Now, when I say that, because people on Twitter go crazy, not that I want to bypass the president of football ops process. When they hire the president of football ops next week is when I think a lot of people expect that to happen. I think Mike Vrabel should be catapulted to the top of that list. Coaches like him, Craig, in our listening audience, aren't supposed to become available. He's not available because of organizational failure there with the Tennessee Titans. The last 2 years is the only time during his 6-year tenure they didn't have a winning season. They're 2 years removed from an AFC championship berth. They were the number 1 seed in the AFC when Joe Burrow and company went to the Super Bowl. He gets the most out of his guys, man. I am a huge Mike Vrabel stan. The only issue that I think naturally arises with Mike Vrabel and any defensive-minded candidate, as we've discussed on this show, is what happens with the offense. Because, in all honesty, I think that's the regression of Ryan Tannehill, him getting hurt, I think really, hurt Mike Vrabel in his time in Tennessee. Obviously, they come off of a 12-win season, Craig, and they trade A.J. Brown to the Philadelphia Eagles. The dumbest decision, to me, made by a franchise in the last 2 or 3 seasons. Because look at what A.J. Brown
I'd have to look at the other candidates, but, obviously, it's not a good one.
I think that was the start of the fall of Mike Vrabel in Tennessee. He did not want that to happen, obviously. Doing some digging on some of the reporting out there in Tennessee, he was kind of reluctant to engage in a full-blown rebuild, and I understand that, considering the early success he had while he was there. He's an interesting guy. He would probably – the other 31 coaches in the NFL, not that this matters, would not want to fight Mike Vrabel. He's a tough ass. I love everything about him, man.
Yeah.
He's authentic. He's real. That's all.
Yeah. I am a big Mike Vrabel fan as well.
Yeah.
I think the counterpoints to him being the top candidate start with you just can't overcome the defense thing. And I'm not saying that a bad offensive coach is better than a good defensive coach.
Right.
But you go from Matt LaFleur to Arthur Smith to Todd Downing, and that also has something to whoever it was this year. And that has something to do with the regression, right? And part of it is, Tannehill, and they whiffed very badly on Malik Willis.
Yeah.
And Will Levis wasn't enough to, be inspiring or change the trajectory this year where ownership felt like it was good to move forward.
I think ownership wants to move forward with Levis. It's just Vrabel.
No.
He lost the
Vrabel,
power
that's
struggle.
what I mean. To feel like he's the right guy to lead the young quarterback, which is obviously something to consider here.
Right.
I think that, obviously the offensive line broke down. Like a guy like Taylor Lewan, who was an all-pro left tackle, or maybe not all-pro, but a Pro Bowl left tackle when Vrabel started, ultimately winds up retiring because of leg issues.
Yeah.
The deterioration of the talent is a big deal on the offensive side of the ball, but also they didn't have a cohesive offensive plan because they kept changing coordinators. And that is the nature of hiring a defensive head coach. That said, you said something that I think is incredibly important that Logan and I have kind of circled in on over the last couple of weeks of talking about this. Toughness has got to be the center of the culture of any winning football team.
Yes,
and
because of the nature of the sport.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Vrabel brings that. And we're talking about mental toughness, but also physical toughness.
The ability to fight through things.
I used this earlier today. I think I was on AWOD's show down in Richmond talking about this. And I was like, I want a team that, win or lose, the opponent leaves FedEx Field going, that hurt, I'm glad that's over.
Ouch.
Even if you win, you're like, damn, that sucked.
Yeah.
I hated that win. That was brutal.
Yeah.
That's the kind of team you want. That's what they built in San Francisco. That's what they built in a lot, and there's varying versions of it, right? Like Miami beats you up with speed. But they still beat you up. There's a physicality to what they do that is imposing. It's instead of blunt force, it's speed. And so you have to have a toughness and I think a guy like Vrabel brings you that instantly, which is why I'd absolutely want to interview him.
And there's a credibility aspect too, because he was a darn good player during his time. And that was a lot more recent than a guy like Ron Rivera, who played in the 80s. So it's levels to it. The one thing, looking at the hiring cycle as a whole, notice that there are way more strong defensive-minded candidates than there are offensive-minded candidates. And does that force a guy to get hired too early? Because people are coveting these offensive candidates.
So like thinking about like Slowick.
Like Slowick. And I love Bobby Slowick because – and he would be my top offensive-minded candidate. So let me say that out there.
You would
That's
put
a
him
take.
over Johnson.
And here I will put Bobby Slowick as my top offensive candidate over Ben Johnson, and here's why. You look at what Houston did this year offensively, a lot of it centered around the quarterback, but the ability to not have a drop-off when your offensive line is battered. Nico Collins was your number one wide receiver. They just don't have a lot of talent there in Houston, and I know they're about to play in the playoffs, so I think conventional wisdom would say, yeah, it's a damn good roster. No, they're bad along the offensive line outside of Tunsil. They were banged up. They're on to their 5th or 6th center right now. Things got ugly with Houston, but Bobby Slowick, because he is a young, bright offensive mind, was able to keep things afloat, and they're the winners of their division because of it.
For sure. I think what we're also going to find out, though, over the next couple of years is C.J. Stroud like just that dude?
Is he just invincible?
Like,
yeah. Is he coach-proof?
And look, you could have some of both, right? Like Slowick could be a dude and Stroud could be a dude in their respective positions,
right.
And they came together, and it took every bit of both of their dudeness to overcome 5 centers, right? Like that's a hell of a season they put together down in Houston. And you talk about toughness, like D'Amico's got it.
Yes.
But I think Slowick, I think Johnson and what they built in Detroit, the whole grit thing, like he's a part of that in a big way. The way they've drafted offensively, and I think for me, when I compare Vrabel to some of those guys, I think also with a young quarterback, have someone who's got that kind of mindset, the offensive mindset. We got to protect this guy. We got to insulate him and also create a lot of stuff around him. And I think just the way you think about football offensively tends to do that more. There's a detailed level of thinking to offensive football that you don't have defensively. Now, there are a bunch of really smart defensive coaches that have that. Raheem Morris has been working with Sean McVay for a long time.
He's been a pass game coordinator before.
Yeah, and he's coached on the offensive side. He wasn't particularly good at it, which I think is probably – people just like to throw it out there. It's like, oh, well, he coached both sides. It was like there's a reason he went back to defense. But he has had to think about the game that way. And, you know, whether it's with Kyle and everybody going against them in practice here or with Sean, like he has got that experience. A guy like D'Amico working under Kyle in San Francisco, I think matters. Salah's got it in New York. In a way that I think matters, and unfortunately his hands are tied by Aaron Rodgers, and Aaron Rodgers has a deadweight tied to him, not known as the Pat McAfee show, and what he does there.
I would love to hear your thoughts on that too, man.
I think we should stop giving certain people attention.
Well,
and also letting them hire offensive coordinators like Nate Hackett. So,
okay,
all due respect to Nate Hackett, who's a very nice man, but he is not good at
off
the job.
the top rope, Hoffman.
But like,
I hear you though.
That's the thing for me is just like I would rather have the offensive guy. Still, if I'm going to hire a defensive guy, I think Vrabel shoots pretty high to the top of my list. I think your guy McDonald in Baltimore is also a pretty innovative thinker and brings a lot of juice and energy. The good thing is like I just think there's a lot of good candidates, and we hit this every year where it feels like, oh, of course we haven't seen them do it yet, but it does really feel like this year's a little bit different. So obviously good for the Commanders to be in the market. Obviously, their first task is to hire a front office person. We'll get you some of the latest names and Lynnell's takes on that. Plus, if there's any leftover takes from the Ron Rivera era, we'll pick his brain. It's Overreaction Tuesday. The takes keep flying next on the Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and always live on the free Odyssey app. First, a look at what's trending. show. We're on the Team 980. Always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Streaming live on YouTube at the Team 980. Lynnell Willingham in studio with us, wrapping up Overreaction Tuesday. Lynnell, we actually don't even have that much show left.
I'm about to say, yeah, you get cut loose early today because of Hoyas?
Yeah, Seton Hall, Georgetown tonight.
And then you got cut loose last night because of the Wizards.
Yep.
Look at y'all. Just getting in, getting out.
Yeah. And
just
then
two Orangemen.
Tomorrow we got Wizards, and then Thursday we've got Maryland. So if you want to listen to us between 6:45 and 7 o'clock, you got to wait till Friday.
It's a struggle. That last 15 minutes, man, that's...
I say the last segment's always... It's a breeze. Pop quiz. Did you know that you couldn't microwave chili in a Solo cup?
JP Finley. Just ridiculous.
I was
didn't
asking
know
you.
That. I didn't know that. I
You
did
didn't
know that. Sorry, I did know
Okay,
that. Who
I was
would
about
put
to say.
plastic... I learned a long time ago. I tried to microwave McDonald's inside of the packaging. Set my entire child care microwave on fire.
Oh, yeah, no, that's not good.
I was like 10, 11 years old. It wasn't
yeah,
good.
but you were 10.
I was an idiot.
Yeah, in that particular case, it's you learn.
learn.
I hope that JP knows you can't do tinfoil. By the way, if you're like, what are you guys talking about? JP learned today as a father of two that you can't microwave a plastic cup. Anthony, did you know that you cannot microwave plastic?
Have you been talking? I know you're upset about the Colts and what happened on Saturday.
Why you got to do that? It's
I'm
my
sorry.
guy.
No, that's inappropriate.
Hold on,
that's,
man.
No, that's inappropriate. And I apologize.
Linnell, because now I want to come put you in an L. An L, man.
Did you
but
know?
yes, I did know that you could not warm up or microwave plastic. I had a younger brother that's 10 years younger than me. Linnell, you're disrespectful.
Linnell just pointed to the TV where the Colts and Texans game is on right now because NFL Network is on. But okay, so Anthony knew. That's great. Love that.
He's a smart guy. I'm not surprised both of you knew. You two Orangemen.
Yeah, I don't think we needed to get to Syracuse to know that. Just
JP didn't go to Syracuse. He didn't know.
he went to Maryland. You want to know what? I'm not going to put that on the University of Maryland. That's not a Terp problem. That's a JP problem.
He a Terp. He is.
I was listening for about 2 minutes today as I drove around town, and those are the 2 minutes I heard. So, yikes, man.
In and around the Beltway.
Anyway, all right, we got about 5-6 minutes here.
I had a declaration I wanted to make.
Okay.
Oh, did I just forget it that quickly? That Texans fan is distracting.
I had a declaration I wanted to make. If only I could remember it. Wow, you sound like me.
Oh my God, I'm completely blanking right now. I'm sorry. I had a secondary thing about D'Amico Ryans.
Was it something defense-offense related, defensive head coach versus offensive, specific to D'Amico, energy, toughness? These are all the things we were talking about.
Energy, toughness, that's the thing, and a big reason why I'm okay with Vrabel. Yeah, this is not good radio, and I can't believe I forgot what I said, what I was going to say, but I'm apologizing to you right now.
Okay. Well, do you have any other takes that you would like to spout off, or would you like to talk about just generally the front office candidates that are being interviewed? Because I'm here for a take if you got one, or a proclamation if you remember it.
I am thrilled about the way the hiring process has gone. I loved Josh Harris's presser yesterday. I thought he was very personable. He was human, showed emotion. He is hell-bent on winning, and I think anyone who can't appreciate that, this probably isn't the search process for you.
I'm going to stop you right there, though.
Yeah.
Because Dan Snyder was also mentally, in his own mind, hell-bent on winning.
But Dan thought he was the smartest guy in the room all the time. I don't think Josh does, which is why he went outside the box.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's the difference, right?
Yes.
There's a lot. Everyone wants to win. Winning requires humility to understand what you do and don't know.
Yep.
And figuring out what you don't know starts with admitting that you don't know something.
Ding.
And Josh Harris has no problem doing that. And I think that's great.
Yeah. Love that about him. In terms of organizational structure, and I know we talked about that, he had a bite in his press conference yesterday where in gambling they use the term hedge to try to cover your butt on a bet.
Yes.
If you had a long parlay or something. Josh Harris hedged yesterday, and here's how I think he hedged. He said there would be flexibility. Hold on, I'm ready to pull up the exact quote.
Yeah, I know exactly the quote that you're talking about. I'm trying to remember which one because we have all the quotes from yesterday.
He said, we'll be flexible
here
about
we go.
talent.
Actually, tell you what. I think this is the actual quote. So here's Josh Harris yesterday on organizational structure.
Yeah, so we're looking for the best people to build an elite franchise that's going to consistently compete and win championships. So that's kind of our goal. In terms of the structure, obviously I start with talent. You want the best talent. And sometimes, you let the talent just sort of influence the structure. But my orientation, obviously, is that being the head of football operations, being in essence in that lead role, that's an 80-hour-a-week job. Being a head coach, that's an 80-hour-a-week job. I think there are two roles there. And so I think it's harder. I mean, there are certainly individuals that control everything. I think it's increasingly hard. So my orientation is not to do that. But on the other hand, I'm going to really be somewhat flexible around talent. So that's kind of how I'm gonna think about it, and I hope that answered your question a bit.
I love that answer at the end. I hope that answers your question a bit. Just another example of him being a human. But I think that was a hedge for a certain guy that won a national championship last night.
I don't disagree, although I have come around to not wanting him here.
I don't want him here either because crazy follows wherever he goes, and this organization's had enough crazy.
That is well put. That is exactly why I think Harbaugh will go somewhere and win. I don't know that he could do that. I don't know that that's the best thing for this organization long term.
Yes, I agree with you 100%. I'm interested in him being a quarterback developer, though. That has me enamored with him because he's had success. But, I just think it shows how well-rounded Josh is, man. He knows that, hey, that's probably not the best way to do it, but there are aliens out here in the NFL coaching and executive profession, and you got to let an alien be an alien. And the fact that he is already showing that, hey, look, I got to be flexible, I think is a really, really good sign for the way this process is going to go, not just for hiring your football people, but rebranding, stadium, all the above, 100%. Man. He is a progressive-thinking dude, and I think that's the best part about this process.
I think what I like the most is there is a long list of tasks that have to be accomplished by certain people with certain characteristics. And what he realizes is you don't have to say the first 6 have to be by person A, the next 6 by person B. Right. That if person A can do 1, 2, 3, 7, 9, and 12, let them.
Yeah.
And just you have to go back and cover where typically 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 are done by person A. Hey, 4, 5, and 6 aren't checked yet. You better find someone else. Yeah. And so if that is an analytics person being the lead person, okay, we need a scouting assistant GM, or we need someone, a cap person. They're going to hit all the boxes. It's just who has the most power and the biggest influence. And then how well do those people work together? And I have a lot of faith that they think about that stuff. And by the way, that's why Bob Myers is involved in this process.
Right.
Bob Myers set up the Golden State front office to do all of that stuff, to make sure that they had, when Travis Schlenk, who's actually ironically now with the Wizards, but when Travis Schlenk left for Atlanta, they had someone else to be the number 2 under Bob. Right? When
the succession
Steve
plan.
Kerr, and they made Steve Kerr set up the coaching staff the same way. When he lost Mike Brown initially, there were people to replace Mike Brown. Mike Brown ultimately comes back and leaves again, if I'm remembering the timelines correctly. Right? There is the people are going to come and go. Understanding who is the most important person to keep, and kind of empowering them with the top job that they're not going to get hired away to be somewhere else, and also developing pipelines and kind of security blankets, some fail safes, some checks, I think is really, really important. And I think a guy like Bob Myers understands that. I think in the companies that they've built, Magic Johnson, Mitchell Rales, and Josh Harris understand that. And I think, obviously, Rick Spielman is there. I hope he also understands that. But he is there to be the football brain because, by the way, that matters too. Lynnell Willingham, tonight on Overtime, 6:30?
Tonight on Overtime, 6:30 to 10, man.
All right.
We'll do a lot of digging and diving.
On 106.7 The Fan. So if you want to listen, of course, to Georgetown Hoops, you got it here on the Team 980. You want some sports talking, it's over there on 106.7 The Fan. Appreciate you, sir. We'll see you next Tuesday.
Yes, sir. We'll do it again.
All right. That is Lynnell Willingham with us here on the Hoffman Show. When we get back, we will wrap things up with Real Things Real People Said into Real Microphones. Hoffman Show wrapping up here on the Team 980 ahead of Georgetown, Seton Hall tonight. Tomorrow night, Wizards here on the Team 980. Thursday, Maryland, Michigan. Friday, we get to be on the air all the way till 7 o'clock. So looking forward to the rest of the week. Tomorrow on the show, hopefully going to catch up with our guy. Do we have Bonta yet booked, or are we still waiting to hear from him?
Still waiting to hear back.
Okay, so he's out on the West Coast, so he hopefully will get Bonta Hill tomorrow, 95.7 The Game on Adam Peters and Bob Myers. And also he told us that Jordan Poole was going to be awesome here, so we're going to have to razz him a little bit about that and ask, what the hell, bro? Because Jordan Poole not playing well. I was listening, Anthony, in the gym today to Zach Lowe's pod, and they were talking about a bunch of Warriors stuff. And then they started talking about the Lakers, or he had Kendra Andrews on to talk about the Warriors, and then he had Dave McMenamin on to talk about the Lakers. And he just was taking shots at the Wizards.
He's like, if you
Zach loves to rib the old Zardos.
Yeah, I mean, but he takes shots in general though. So I guess he's being consistent, but it's not too much to say about the.
I mean, yeah,
the
it's
Zardos
not.
Right now.
What am I gonna do? Stop making fun of one of the worst 4 teams in basketball. No, it is what it is. It's really bad here. It's right now. Obviously, the hope is that it is good moving forward, and I don't really care how bad they are right now because they are figuring a bunch of stuff out at the beginning of a rebuild. But it is kind of funny to be like, he described the Lakers as having Wizardian offense at times, and I was like, that's mean to everybody. He talked about Poole with the Warriors because Kendra was like, the Warriors miss Jordan Poole's scoring. And he's like, you want to know who else misses Jordan Poole's scoring? And I was like, I know where this is going. I was sitting there dying on a ski erg thinking the same thing, so I can't even get mad at him for that one. Jordan Poole and the Wizards miss Jordan Poole's scoring. But, man, it is kind of wild that how much that punch changed everything for everyone.
Literally.
I hate it. I hate it for Jordan because he's apparently a great kid, and he needs to play better for him, for his team, for everything, and it just hasn't happened for him. Other than that, what was the other thing I was going to talk to you? Oh, real quick, before we hit quickly on the college football playoff and hit real things. So I ordered it's not a desk. What's it called? I ordered a cabinet on Amazon, and it's one of those that you put together yourself.
How long did it take you?
I don't know. We're in the middle of it.
Oh, you still aren't finished.
I started it today. It's been sitting in the box for like a week in our kitchen, and eventually I looked at Rachel today. I was like, I think I'm going to start this. She's like, good. It's been sitting there for a week, and I was like, you're right. So I brought it upstairs, and the first piece it's kind of dark up in my studio. Where this cabinet is going, the home studio. And I kept looking at this board, and there's like 3 tiny holes, and I didn't see them. And so at first I was like, great, they sent me the wrong piece. And I kept flipping the thing over, and I was like, no, this is supposed to be facing this way, this, that. And eventually I was like, God, I am so dumb. So that sent me back a while. And then it's just super tedious. And so I got through like the first 5 steps. And like once I got going, it really wasn't that bad. But I had to do some recordings, and I was on a buddy's podcast. Had to record something for the show, and I only got through 5 step of 34. Anthony,
oh my gosh!
I'm not gonna lie. There was a big part of me that was like, do I just gut on TaskRabbit and have someone come over here and finish this while I'm at work?
Have you completed the most rigorous part?
I don't know. I didn't really flip ahead.
Step 5 is insane.
Yeah. I mean, these things are only so complicated, but they can be tedious.
Yes.
Also, they always include the tools, and I'm like, I'm not using your little T-shaped screwdriver. Give me my drill.
What scares me would be if you know how some pieces are like reversible.
Oh, that's the worst.
That is the
when it's like you think you're done, and then it's like you realize half of it's backwards.
Yeah.
No, they do. I will say this cabinet this filing cabinet that I bought does a very good job of being like, this needs to be facing this direction.
Way. Yep. Okay.
So far so good on
that. Good.
I had a tough time getting going.
Yeah.
And hopefully things get better from here. All right. Last but not least, let's wrap up the show with the way we wrap up the show.
Real things.
We're not going to be so this year.
Real people.
5-11, not very good.
Said into real microphones.
You know, the culture is actually damn good.
So Michigan won last night. They crushed Washington. They should not have crushed Washington, although I think they were the better team. Michael Penix, weird how everyone thought he was actually the best quarterback in college football after one good semifinal, and those same people who didn't watch a Michael Penix game all year suddenly maybe got a little bit of a reality check last night. Consistency is important. Also, though, you might have seen his best and then his worst game. Penix, not very good last night, missed a ton of open stuff. And that really cost them. But that Washington team should be really proud of their season. Excellent job. But Michigan, man, fought through self-created adversity, but they fought through it. And I think Harbaugh probably leaves there on that high note, having delivered his alma mater a championship, which is cool for him, I guess, if you're into that kind of thing, winning championships and such.
Yeah, Penix, man. I feel as though all season long, like, you know, his accuracy was just praised, and
for good reason. He was awesome all year, and then last night,
pressure burst that pipe.
And that's the thing that's I think interesting is he was one of the best guys at avoiding pressure all year, and last night Michigan got him, and they got him early. They banged him up a little bit. Yep. He got unlucky on that pick. I mean, it wasn't a good ball.
Yeah.
He got hit, but like his receiver did a good job of playing defense, and the DB made an incredible play.
Yeah.
When I first saw it, I was like, there's no way he stayed in bounds and held on. And he did. So congrats to the Michigan Wolverines. Congrats to all the Michigan fans. And you got yourself a championship, and you probably lost your head coach. So, enjoy the good before the reality of the bad sets in. As for Jim, he can finally sit at the big kids' table. Literally.
Personally, I can now sit at the big person's table in the family. They won't keep me over there on the little table anymore. My dad, Jack Harbaugh, won a national championship, and my brother won a Super Bowl. So it's good to be at the big person table from now on.
He's a weird dude, man. He's just a very odd individual, an odd duck.
He is very weird, but I think a lot of, brilliant-minded or just smart coaches in general can be a little
I always wonder
unique.
about that. Yeah, like McDaniels in a different way in Miami.
Right
like, I always laugh.
Dable, I think, is a little weird, too.
Yeah, I think so. Like, I always laugh at Hard Knocks when they show Mike addressing the Dolphins, and it feels like nobody's really that into it. But like the personal interactions are really good. Like he has a way of when he's not in front of the room being like really human and one-on-one with guys that works. And obviously people I think respect his football acumen. So I don't know. There's something to the genius being a little bit off. I don't know. I've also been reading this book called Why We Sleep, which is the title suggests, it's a book on sleep, but it's really like a book on the brain, and a lot of it framed through sleep, and just the way certain parts of certain people's brains work is fascinating. And if your hippocampus is a little more, or your cerebral cortex or whatever is a little more active or a little less active, it totally changes how you function as a human being. And so I kind of wonder, like, if you sliced open football coaches' brains, or you don't have to slice them open. That's actually not how that works. You put little electrodes on them and you see what parts are active. That's how it actually works. If you did brain scans, what would it look like? I don't know. Probably not going to find out. Anyway, we'll see you tomorrow on the Hoffman Show, talking football and probably not brain scans. Georgetown next.